This is Monaco, a microstate that is smaller than New York's Central Park, roughly 2.1 square kilometers, but still posing a GDP of $11 billion. This little dot of land on the south of France is the richest country per capita in the world with over $288,000. Roughly 1 in 3 people in Monaco are millionaires. Monaco is the kind of place where a 100 square meter apartment can cost you $7 million, and spending $10,000 in shoes is surprisingly one of the easiest things to do there. But this place, which is reasonably small, attracts the wealthiest people from all around the world. They are not visiting, they are moving in permanently in a country that is probably the size of one of their properties. And the reason for that involves one of the largest losses of territory in history, a decision that basically invented the modern tax haven model and one of the biggest gambles any country can make. Monaco has existed as a sovereign state since the 13th century, and it's really never been a big country. In fact, at its greatest extent, it covered 30 square kilometers. Being this small, the House of Grimaldi, the ruling class of Monaco, had one objective: do not get conquered. And they were doing a good job by asking every dominant power in Europe throughout the years for protection. And in 1633, the Grimaldis approached the King of France for protection. And since that time, Monaco has been under the French protection for nearly 200 years. That was until the French Revolution, where every monarchy was considered an enemy, and the newly formed French Republic no longer felt bound by the responsibility of protecting Monaco. So the revolutionaries just annexed the little microstate. Fast forward a little bit, and we get to the point in history where Napoleon was fighting everybody. That was, of course, until he lost and his attempt to return to power failed. The First Treaty of Paris ended the war between France and the Sixth Coalition and attempted to restore Europe to its pre-1792 borders. Monaco was finally returned to the House of Grimaldi, but later on the Congress of Vienna reaffirmed Monaco's nominal independence, but it deliberately placed it under the protectorate of the Kingdom of Sardinia. In being under the Sardinia rule was not even that good for Monaco. The Monaco's economy suffered because now it was tied to the smaller Sardinian market after being linked to the much bigger French one. The new restrictions imposed by the Kingdom of Sardinia hurt trade and revenue very badly. By the 1840s and 50s, the Monaco's government was in deep financial trouble, and as if it couldn't get any worse, Menton and Roquebrune, which were cities that covered almost all of Monaco, revolted and declared themselves as the free cities of Menton and Roquebrune. These two cities covered about 95% of Monaco's total area, and just like that, the main source of taxes for the Monaco's government just disappeared. Sardinia saw this and quickly took the two cities under its rule. Fast forward to 1859, Sardinia desperately needed the help of the French to defeat Austria and reunify Italy, and as a payment for that, Sardinia offered the whole counties of Savoy and Nice, and it did work. Sardinia got what they wanted, and France got new territory. But by giving Savoy and Nice, Monaco was entirely engulfed by France, meaning that it was no longer under the protection of Sardinia. Prince Charles III, the ruler of Monaco at the time, saw this and just sold Menton and Roquebrune to the French. What did he get from that was 4 million francs, roughly 25 million euros in today's money, which will come in pretty handy considering the fact that they were about to go bankrupt. Charles III also secured Monaco's sovereignty, and France promised to connect Monaco to the outside world via roads and railways. That is how Monaco became one of the countries to have one of the biggest losses of territory of all time, as they traded 95% of the whole country for security and a bit of money. So after the Monaco's government lost 95% of their land, they are now faced with the real threat of losing everything else. Because now there is no income, there is simply no money to keep things going, so Prince Charles III started looking for other ways to make money. Inspired by successful spa and gambling towns in Germany like Bad Homburg, they tried to do the same, but every early attempt failed. That was until Prince Charles III convinced Francois Blanc to sign what is arguably one of the most important deals in Monaco's history. Francois had made a fortune running the casino in Bad Homburg, and in April of 1863, the Société des Bains de Mer was created, or SBM for short, the same company that still runs most of Monaco's luxury sector. And later on, in 1965, the first proper casino was opened, and it was an instant hit. The casino was generating so much money that the state could afford to abolish all personal taxes in 1869, and this is how Monaco came to be the tax haven that the rich know and love. Well, except for the French, because in the 1960s, Monaco tax haven model was becoming too successful, and a lot of wealthy French were moving to Monaco to escape the high French taxes. France saw this as a massive tax evasion operation right on their doorstep, and after so much threatening, a treaty was signed in 1963 making any French living in Monaco pay the same taxes as if they were still living in France. Monaco was also forced to make its first corporate tax, where if a company has 25% or more of its profits coming from outside of Monaco, a 25% corporate tax will be imposed on said company, meaning that if they get 75% plus of their profits in Monaco, they are in the clear to not pay any taxes. Monaco is still the tax haven that the rich love, but they don't exactly have no taxes at all. They just have the right kind of taxes, which partly explains why prices are too high in Monaco. Let me start by saying this. One of the easiest things to do in Monaco is buying shoes or handbags that cost $10, $15 or even $20,000. So the best way for the government to profit from such ridiculously high prices is to set a VAT or a value-added tax. Monaco has a 20% VAT, high but still much less than countries like Hungary or Sweden, and it is the main source of the Monegasque tax revenue, as it pulls in more than 50% of all the government's income. Throughout the years, Monaco has positioned itself as useful to the rich as it can ever be. Since the 19th century, the Grimaldis were planning for their survival and their success by offering Europeans something they could not get at home. When European governments were passing law restricting gambling, Monaco came up and offered the best gambling experience in the whole continent. When tax rates were raising in all of Europe, Monaco just abolished all personal taxes. Rich people flocked Monaco from everywhere, and they also brought in their money, built hotels and restaurants, and eventually most celebrities came to Monaco to enjoy the luxury and the world's most lavish parties. This was the story of how a microstate which was colonized and had its sovereignty always threatened, was in the brink of bankruptcy, and had one of the biggest territorial losses in history, managed to become the go-to destination for the rich, have the world's most luxurious hotels, and host the planet's most lavish parties. All of this on a piece of land smaller than New York's Central Park. This was it for today's video. If you are still watching at this point, thank you so much. Drop a like and a subscribe so you don't miss anything new, and see you next time.